Tomorrow in Perth, a Senate inquiry will begin hearing evidence about the future of Australia's criminal justice system and whether governments should be spending less money on building prisons and more on crime prevention. The concept is known as justice reinvestment, and it's proving popular with Republicans in the US, who are keen to cut back government spending. In Australia, the prison system costs taxpayers over $3 billion a year, and that figure is rising with the jail population growing 4% a year for the last 30 years, with Aboriginal adults now being jailed at a rate of 14 times higher than the rest of the community. Indigenous leaders are joining the campaign to introduce a justice reinvestment approach to Australia's criminal justice system. Steve Cannane reports.
Bo, Trey and Kobe are advocates for justice reinvestment. They're working on a film clip as part of the campaign to take taxpayers' dollars out of prisons and put it into crime prevention.
I see my brothers locked up on the streets to survive, but every now and then it's getting harder to say bye.
All three have friends or relatives who've been in jail.
I have a brother that's locked up at the moment. You know, he's not around Christmas, even on his birthday sometimes. We had to celebrate it without him even at our own house, so. And on Christmas times, it's just not the same.
We want to try and make sure that you get them, from the hips.
Bo, Trey and Kobe say being involved in the Cool Kids Club, an early intervention program at La Perouse, has helped them avoid trouble.
They just kept me away from all the bad trouble, I guess. I don't know, I just loved going out with the Cool Kids Club to go fishing, surfing. We even went on the camps up and down the coast and that.
A program like the Cool Kids Club fits in really well with the justice reinvestment model because it looks at, justice reinvestment looks at identifying savings or creating savings in the prison budget, in the corrections budget, and reinvesting that into crime prevention strategies or diversionary programs.
A key part of justice reinvestment is funding community-based initiatives to reduce crime. In Redfern, crime rates have dropped since Shane Phillips set up Clean Slate Without Prejudice, an early morning boxing program involving local police, young offenders and mentors.
This is a pure example of justice reinvestment. We used to think police are the enemy and the police used to think we were the enemy, and there was so much distance between us. We broke that down by doing something simple. We exercise early in the morning at a time which is really, I suppose, only elite athletes will get up and do it.
Police say there's been an 80% drop in robberies committed by Aboriginal youth in Redfern since this program started. And it's kept young men like Jacob out of jail.
He got charged and convicted of an offence shoot with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Carries 25 years. Jacob went to court. I was asked to go to court, I was subpoenaed, I was asked whether he'd be suitable to be on the program. As Shane Phillips was, we agreed he was.
After watching Jacob get his life back on track, Luke Frudenstein took him along to a job interview at Linfox.
Luke was there in the room beside me, I couldn't lie, I had to be upfront about everything. Yeah, then at the end of the job, at the end of the interview, she gave me the job on the spot because of Luke.
He's doing community service, he's working, he's paying taxes, and he's mixing with good people rather than perhaps being inside with not so good people.
Despite its successes, this program has struggled to maintain funding. It needs money to pay the mentors who help keep Redfern's Indigenous youth on track. Mick Gooder says these kinds of programs end up saving taxpayers' money.
We did some sums around if Aboriginal people were represented in jail the same rate they're represented in the community, that is about 3%, there'd be savings like $600 million a year here. So there's also almost a fiscal imperative to look at things like justice reinvestment.
And it's money that's driving the debate in the US. Prominent Republicans like Newt Gingrich, Jeb Bush and Grover Norquist have signed on for a campaign to cut incarceration rates. But in Australia, it's been a Green senator pushing for an inquiry into justice reinvestment.
The point of the Senate inquiry is to look at to what extent the concept of reducing the number of people in prison to save money and then reinvest that money in those communities where we know that crime occurs, all based on strong evidence, to see if that concept can be adapted for Australian conditions and can give us an alternative to what we're doing now, which is actually failing.
Down at this Redfern gym, they don't need a Senate inquiry to tell them that justice reinvestment works.
The cost of paying for 2 kids would have gone into custody, pays for 4 mentors, and it pays for, well, it doesn't pay for it, it covers the cost of keeping those kids out. And those kids are not just staying out, they're going into employment, so they pay their taxpayers. So it's a no-brainer.
Steve Cannane, Lateline.
So where do we turn to find world's best practice? Dallas, Texas. Jerry Madden is the former chairman of the Texas House of Representatives Corrections Committee and now a senior fellow with the think tank Wright on Crime. When he was appointed to the Corrections Committee in 2007, Texas was planning to spend $500 million on new prisons to cope with surging crime rates. But Jerry Madden had a better idea. He and his Republican colleagues reinvested much of that money into crime prevention programs. Before their initiative, the prison population in Texas was projected to increase by 5,000 inmates in just 1 year. Instead, it grew by just 500. Jerry Madden now joins us from Dallas, Texas. Jerry Madden, welcome to Lateline.
Emma, I'm glad to be here and thank you very much for having me.
Now, help us understand what you were facing. What were incarceration numbers like in Texas when you joined the Corrections Committee? What was the extent of the challenge you were facing?
The challenge actually I was given was given me by the Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives in 2005 when he called me in and said, "You're Chairman of Corrections." And I asked him, "Well, Mr. Chairman, what do you want me to do?" And he gave me the 8 words that changed my life. He said, "Don't build new prisons. They cost too much." We have over 150,000 people in the prisons of Texas. We have had another 78,000 that were on parole and over 400,000 that were on probation. So we have a very large system. In 2007, when we started the major work that we did in justice reinvestment, we had a projection that said we were going to add 17,700 prisoners by the year 2012. And since that wasn't my objective that I had been given by my speaker, we started looking at ways that how could you change it so we didn't get an additional 17,000 people. We quickly looked at could we open the doors and let people go, or could we slow them down coming in, and figured out the best way in Texas was certainly to try to figure out a way to slow them down coming in.
So where did you start? Yes.
I started in probation. They had some very progressive thinking people who had some good ideas that said, gee, if you could have some more money available for us, we could reduce the number of people coming to prison. So we started looking there, and our 2005 legislation looked at that. We came within 1 vote of getting it passed, but in 2007 we had taken the ideas that was in that legislation and expanded on it, so we didn't look just at the area of people who were coming in and had not been to prison, but we looked at those who had left that were on parole. We looked at those and how to treat them when they're in prison. And we looked at even earlier when we looked at our juvenile system, when we looked at the education system, and when we looked even earlier back into the early family situations and how could you break that cycle of people coming to prison, this pathway to prison as it's called, and where do you do the break points. And fortunately for us, what happened in 2007 is with this projection of additional people, they projected we needed to build 3 prisons immediately in that legislative session at a cost of $500+ million. We knew at that time what programs we needed to break that cycle, where we needed to put them, and we knew by then how much money it was going to cost for us to do that, and it was significantly less than the $500 million that they were asking for new prisons. We were able to talk our colleagues in the legislature into giving us a chance with our program, and since that time we've been highly successful.
So how many of those 3 extra prisons were built?
None. We actually put some money into additional substance abuse treatment beds, but we built no prisons. And in fact, in 2011, the state of Texas closed a prison, and in the cycle they're going through now in 2013 in the legislature, it appears that they're going to close at least 2 more prisons. We still have a lot of prisons, but that's the first time that they had ever closed a prison in the state of Texas. Between our 2011 legislative session and this one, we're down over 6,000 prisoners in the state prisons, and our crime rate is down, and we're having extreme success in people not returning to prison.
So tell us then, all the research you did in that early phase, where did that essentially direct your spend? What did that tell you about where the money was best allocated?
We've actually seen results. The results we're seeing is a great place to look. We looked at substance abuse treatment. We gave them more capabilities to do substance abuse because there's a large number of people there. We looked at mental health and provided additional funding into the mental health areas because there are a lot of people in our prisons that have some type of mental diagnosis. And we found that the greatest success that we had was in our parole, those people who had been to prison, and providing them with things like mentors, things like capabilities going back into the community, things like intermediate sanctions for our parole people. Our parole rates have dropped, our parole revocations have dropped substantially from over 10,000 that we had in 2005 to just around 6,000 revocations that we had this last year. So that's a huge cut in the number of people actually returning back to prison.
So what can you tell us about the cost of building new prisons compared to the cost of crime prevention programs like you've detailed?
Well, they're substantially less expensive. A new prison in Texas, depending on what type you build, whether it's high security, medium, or low security prisons, will run somewhere around $200 million to build, and another, in a biennium, about $40 million to operate. So what we successfully did is stopping building prisons for 17,700 people was probably about 7 or 8 or 9 prisons that we didn't build. We figured we had saved the state at least $2 billion in that period of time. In fact, probably more. The programs in the community cost a whole lot less. Probation programs, maybe $3 or $4 a person a day. Well, it costs us $50 a day to imprison them in the state prisons.
So I guess you've probably answered my next question, which was that traditionally the conservative side of politics is all about being tough on crime, throwing away the key. So I was struggling to understand how these policies squared with your Republican roots.
It actually squared quite well because we are also an economic party that believes in the best utilization of our taxpayers' funds. And if you make your community safer and you reduce crime and you also change lives and you change them for the better, you've in fact accomplished major goals. You can also do better things for victims of crime. I mean, it's better to have a victim get compensation, and they certainly don't get a lot of compensation for somebody who's locked up in the prisons, whereas if they're a worker and paying taxes and can repay the crimes, most victims of crime, not all, but most, would like to be recompensed for their losses that they had, and that's a preferable way to even help the victims of crime.
Tell us how your approach has spread throughout the United States.
We worked with several different groups nationally. I was on the board of every major legislative group that we have in this country, the National Conference of State Legislators, American Legislative Exchange Conference, Council of State Governments, and our Justice Center. And in doing that, we've gone out and told them what Texas did. And in telling them that, we've been able to communicate to many legislators what we did, how we did it, and why it's a good policy to do. Whether you're conservative or you're liberal or moderate, doesn't matter. There are gains there for everyone to make. We're better off spending money wisely than we are spending it foolishly, and that's what's been the major message to other states that have been picked up through all of these organizations, so that states like Georgia and Kentucky and Ohio and Oklahoma and others have gone and followed the same path that we had, with a pretty fair amount of success in their states also.
Now, we have a Senate inquiry starting here in Australia tomorrow on this very issue. What do you think are the lessons Australia can learn from your experience?
Well, there were several that I tell legislators to do. First of all, I tell them the easiest part is to pass legislation. The next easiest part is to implement programs. So make sure they're implemented well and that they operate in the way that you wanted them to, and that they get the results that you expect them to get. Don't just go do a program because it sounds good. Do it because it's evidence-based and it's resource-oriented, such that you are pretty confident that you will get those results. And the third thing is monitor the program, and the fourth thing is be able to react and have data that shows that you're being successful. So require in anything you do, whatever it is, that the lesson I would say is make sure that you require whoever is doing your programs and whatever programs you have, that they provide you as a responsibility in their program to give you data that shows that it's working and that they're getting approximately the results that you anticipated.
Jerry Madden, we have to leave it there. Congratulations on your achievements, and we thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this evening.
Emma, I'm quite honoured to be there, and it's this morning here where I'm at.